I put every dime I own into gold. I studied economics. I worked on Wall Street. I'm going to share with you why I've moved everything that I own into gold. This is the Catharsis Project. This is just an avenue for me to be creative and express myself. None of this is meant to be taken seriously. And I'm going to repeat this throughout this video. This is not investing advice. Nothing in this should be construed in investing advice, because what I did is probably pretty stupid, but I'm going to share with you what I observed, what I am observing, and why I moved everything I own into gold. Now, just to set the table stakes, I started my own business 4 years ago. I've invested and reinvested everything that I own in terms of cash into my actual business. So the only thing that's left is my retirement fund, my IRA 401k that I developed over 10-ish years in corporate. I did try to put as much as I could aside in those retirement funds. So everything in those retirement funds, more or less, is now in gold, and I'll share with you why. To begin, let me start with what has been my personal investing philosophy. Well, when I started my career, I worked on Wall Street, and it was a pretty interesting experience. I showed up to Wall Street during the great financial crash around 2010, 2011. And what I noticed was, despite these major investors having basically gone bankrupt and having to be bailed out by the government and selling their companies to healthier banks, if that even existed at that time, they were still gambling like crazy. So when I was there, I just saw some really abhorrent stuff that I was like, I don't know, still makes my skin crawl. And I was like, damn, these guys are like gambling like crazy. And I just saw that, like, I'm telling you, you got to trust me. Like, it really is just gambling. Like, they would take other people's money and they would just bet on things that had like 50-50 outcomes just to get a little high that day. And meanwhile, I studied economics, and in econ, what you learn is kind of this thing called econ efficiency theory. I think it's something like that. That basically the most prudent investing strategy, according to this theory, that I tend to follow, and something that Warren Buffett says, is, look, if you're not a large institutional investor, you can't actually move the market, then one of the safest things likely is that you can follow the market. Yeah, is just invest in the S&P 500, which essentially just tracks the US economy as a whole, and just sit tight, right? Like, that's going to help you beat inflation, and you're basically just betting on the US economy continuing to be strong, which is a good bet to make also, because if you live in the United States, you want your economy to be strong. So my incentives are aligned. Yeah, I want the country to do well. I want my money to do well. So it's good to invest in the US economy broadly. Again, none of this is investing advice. This is just what I've done. So based on my education and what I saw on Wall Street, that's what I've been doing for largely the last 10-ish years. Is I've just been investing in the S&P 500, low-cost ETFs. I don't want fucking money managers skimming off the top of my money for no reason. I'm a big fan of personally doing that strategy. Up until last year. Last year, something changed, and that is Trump's Liberation Day. Around that time, Trump announced massive tariffs, kind of chaotically and wildly. It seemed like almost on every country in the world. And there was tremendous political upheaval and economic upheaval at that time. And what I heard from a lot of people around that time, talking to people, reading on the internet, why should I take my money out? You know, people who didn't panic. The US economy always does great in the long run. The US stock market always goes up in the long run. So that's the kind of ethos of a lot of very positive, stock market is going to do great. I mean, just a caveat here is this is like such a basic line in finance. You hear it all the time, but past performance does not predict future outcomes. Like, just because something did well in the past does not predict or mean anything about the future. So yeah, okay, the US economy has gone up over time. The stock market has gone up. There's no guarantee that that's going to happen. And so under that, right, is like the fundamental equation is like, you're basically saying that the fundamentals of the economy are going to remain the same, and those fundamentals will yield the same outcome. Now, the thing that really kind of changed my opinion on all of this, because generally speaking, I'd say, yeah, invest for the long term. You don't pick and choose winners and losers. Don't bet. But around April of last year, 2025, Trump started to threaten the federal chairman, the chair of the Fed, Jerome Powell. Now, the Fed has a vital role because it essentially manages the money supply. It's true that the Treasury can kind of do it, but it's kind of impotent. It's not able to make truly enough waves to do that. It's just not enough money it can pull in and out of circulation. The Fed truly, through interest rates and how much money it prints and chooses to allocate to banks, it truly controls the flow of money. And up until now, it's been an independent institution. So has not yielded to political pressure. So Trump has a desire to print more money, and he's been placing tremendous pressure on Jerome Powell to lower interest rates so that in theory we start stimulating the economy. Generally speaking, it seems like when you lower interest rates, the stock market seems to do better because there's money sloshing around, banks do better. In theory, there's loans being made out, people start moving in the housing market a lot more. But we've had a huge problem, which is in the last 5 years, we've had significant inflation. Some of that was due to the COVID-19 and supply chain kind of bottlenecking. Some of it seems to be a lot of stimulus spending, both from the federal government combined with cutting the interest rates from the Federal Reserve. So all of these kind of players got together and we flooded the market with US dollars. So we're dealing with inflation. Compared to COVID, most states, I think on average, when I looked at it, have had about 20% inflation when you look at the cost of goods. So things are 20% more expensive than they used to be. And the inflation year over year rate is still a little too high for most people's liking. The thing is still kind of wonky. It's not still settled down yet. Then you introduce tariffs. Tariffs are a tax on the American people. So prices go up, but in theory, demand should go down. You stop buying things when the prices go up. But it depends on the thing. That's like economics 102. When you go to microeconomics, there's some places where you have sticky prices, places where people have to keep buying necessities even when the prices go up. So this theoretical utopia sold in econ courses of like amazing supply and demand that are perfectly elastic very rarely exist in the actual economy. A lot of times these things are what's called inelastic, which is that things go up, but like actually we still need something. In COVID-19, we all wanted and needed toilet paper. So even when you increased the price on toilet paper, we still go out and buy it. And even more urgently, let's say water. Let's say you start to increase the price of water, but we still need to drink water. So people will probably end up paying higher prices for water because it's a necessity. So the tariffs, that's an open question. Are they going to essentially drive down demand, drive down consumerism? Or are we going to have to eat another kind of price shock? Or who eats the price shock? Are we going to lower the profits of the corporations? Yeah, they eat the price and only pass on some to consumers. What seems to have happened so far, recording this in January 2026, is on average, I read this the other day, on average, average tariff rate placed on countries by the Trump administration is around 27%, but the effective tariff that we end up paying is around 14%. Some of that is because there's been mismanagement of applying the tariff. Some of it is that we still have yet to actually see some of the inventory be depleted. A lot of the ships that were already left port and were on their way here have not been tariffed. So this could go up, right, in the kind of immediate future. But some demand seems to have gone down. So the consumerism thing is going down. But in general, I'm like, all right, here's another price shock. So we've had inflation. We're going to have these price shocks. through the tariffs. So there's a lot of like inflationary pressure, right? So that's one vector, one arrow is like, okay, prices will go up. On the flip side, for at least the last year, it seems like corporate has completely stalled out. Hiring is completely frozen for about a year now. Folks who are unemployed know this very well. It's very, very difficult to get a job. A lot of the GDP numbers, if you look in aggregate, they're like, oh, they're going up. But like under the surface, it's a little bullshit because they're very concentrated in data centers or healthcare. Most sectors are doing pretty shitty right now in the United States. And so when you double click, and if you look by state, some states are, of course, impacted much heavier than others. So you have this weird thing known as stagflation. Yeah, we're back to the 70s, stagflation, kind of hitting the United States right now, where the economy is seizing up, it's freezing, but also prices are stubbornly high and kind of continue to go up. When you have inflation, what do is you raise your interest rates. So you basically seize up the pool of money. You stop printing money. What happens though if you have a depression or recession is you want to print money, you get things moving, right? You get the party going. But what happens when you have both at once? Well, then it's really hard for the Federal Reserve to make any moves. So the Federal Reserve kind of freezes. It stops kind of trying to move in one direction or the other. And I think when you pick between what do we try and kind of save here, jobs or prices, there's different implications to each, and both start to get a weirdly political flavor. So what we've seen historically in the United States is inflation causes like mass unrest. Most like protest revolutions, they usually are preceded by some sort of inflation. Whereas a depression, most people sit at home and don't do shit. And people have speculated why that might be. One is inflation hits everyone across the board kind of equally. So it's kind of a mass collective phenomenon. Whereas with depressions, recessions, you know someone down the street that's lost their job, maybe you've lost your job, but it's rare that everyone's lost their job, and it's rare that everyone feels the same pressure at the same time in the same way. So it's a bit uneven. It's kind of tough to generalize what's happening to people on an individual level in kind of depressions. So you have both of these kind of vectors at once. So at a minimum, I'm like, all right, the Federal Reserve is kind of like frozen. It doesn't know what to do. And it's got to either stay frozen or it's got to pick a winner or a loser. So these are the three choices the Federal Reserve has to pick between. Okay, but here's where it gets weirder and kind of worse, and where I think the fundamentals themselves are forever going to be changed by the policies of the administration. This still isn't good enough for the Trump administration. They want to print money. But what I really think they want, what they're really after, is a depreciated dollar. They want to weaken the dollar because that kind of aligns with their whole mercantilist, protectionist kind of theory of the world. So in the kind of MAGA playbook, the kind of Trumpian worldview in economics, they believe that outflows, so money leaving the country, is bad, and that we should basically hoard all our money inside the country. So this whole thing of like having a trade deficit, what is a trade deficit? Is like we buy stuff from overseas and we give money for that, and we do that more than we sell things overseas. So there's a trade deficit, means there's flows of money in US dollars going outwards. In the Trumpian view, we should not have a trade deficit. Yeah, so like we should be having our money and we should be exporting. So we should be exporting goods and services and holding our money close, right? It's our money. You don't get any of it. And that's one of the things you do with tariffs. Tariffs is like a protectionary measure where you say, we don't want your shit coming into our country. We don't want our money going to your country. Here's the rub. The United States dollar is the reserve currency of the world. What that means is that largely the US dollar is the currency that the world trades in. So all the other denominations of currency, British pound, the European euro, dirhams, and the UAE, if you want to exchange them one for the other, you generally have to go through the intermediary called the dollar. Also, a lot of countries hold the dollar as a kind of safety, a backup, because up until now, the US is a very kind of conservative, stable place. So holding US dollars, even if your currency is going crazy, kind of supports you to stay stable. A lot of small countries that have a lot of issues with their currency, they peg their currency to the US dollar, which means that they basically force their currency to track USD so they don't have rampant inflation. So up until now, we're the conservative, the solid US dollar, we're rock solid. After World War II, the United States decided to become the reserve currency of the world. It wasn't always like that. Before that, it was the British pound. So at the Bretton Woods Conference, the US and the Brits actually had a bit of a tussle. If you know the economist Keynes, so John Maynard Keynes, he was actually pushing for the UK British pound to remain the reserve currency after the war. And the US government was a bit split. The Treasury Department, it's a fascinating story. The Treasury Department was trying to become the reserve currency, and the State Department, which had a lot of kind of Nazi and German affiliation, was trying to scuttle the deal. And at the Bretton Woods Conference, there was like all of this tussle back and forth, who's going to be the reserve currency. And the night before they were going to kind of agree to a treaty, Keynes had I think it was a stroke or a heart attack. He collapsed. And it was that night that the U.S. put in the footprint of the treaty that everyone signed in the Bretton Woods Conference, that trade would be done in U.S. dollars. So through a legal footnote, and everyone signed it, the night after Keynes kind of collapsed and I think died, that's how the US dollar became supreme. It's like such a weird fluke and literal footnote of history. So what does that mean? So the world wants to have US dollars in their reserves. Yeah? Okay, we're not going to give them free money. That wasn't part of the deal, is like you get free money. So how does the world transact in US dollars and save US dollars? Well, they have to give something up for that. What do they give up? Goods, services, bonds, like whatever they can sell to us, we would buy and we would give them US dollars. And then they would hold on to those US dollars. So what happens when these countries are holding on to US dollar, right? They're saving it, they're spending it, they're using it as reserve currency. Well, the money supply is outflowing abroad. So there's less dollars at home for Americans. Yeah. So the value of the US dollar tends to go up. The money supply shrinks. The Federal Reserve has to find this balance. Again, it wants growth, but not inflation. So it has to print money just at the kind of right level so that we have enough money to transact in the United States, and the people abroad also have enough money to have as reserve currency. So that's been the kind of world order since 1945, 46, whenever we did the Bretton Woods Conference, 1940s, is the United States has to print shitload of dollars so that the whole world can transact on those dollars. We saw a very similar phenomenon with the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire, was it the lira? What did they use in Rome? I think it might have been the lira. It became the global currency. So what you found was a lot of outflows of that currency. The currency would leave the core of the Roman Empire and go to the peripheries. So you have a bit of this difficult situation in managing the money supply. All of this automatically means you're going to have a trade deficit. The moment you're a reserve currency, you're always going to have a trade deficit because the money will always flow out of the country. So as long as people want dollars, dollars will flow out of the United States. And then in turn, we have to essentially import other shit from them so that they can get their dollars. That's been a bit of the bargain. The good thing of having a reserve currency is you can essentially bully everyone else and use your economics to run the world. So United States absolutely has had an empire. People may not want to call it that, but anyone who relies on this US dollar system is essentially beholden to the United States and the United States policies. So we have a very large periphery and a lot of soft influence in our empire. Sometimes we do have boots on the ground. We have boots on the ground in Europe, even though we're quote unquote very cordial. But as long as they're running on USD and US defense, the double Ds, they're beholden to us. There's only so much you can probably go and cross the United States before the reality of the double D, dollar and defense, kind of comes to bite your ass. So since the 40s, we've had this system. We've had a trade deficit. It's kind of almost inevitable. Now, I should, again, asterisk, trade deficit and budget deficit are not the same. So trade deficit is just about the flows in and out of the country. A lot of times in the United States, we talk about budget deficits, and that just means we're spending more than we're earning, right? So from taxes and all the other things that we do. So of course, we don't have to deficit spend. So during the Clinton administration, you can collect more revenues, collect more taxes than you're actually spending as a government. This is a totally different issue than the trade deficit. And again, this is something that I almost wonder if the Trump administration's aware of the difference of some of these terms, but okay. So what you've seen in this kind of constellation, in this makeup, is that certain actors kind of come out to play when you have this kind of chessboard set up. One of which is the bond vigilantes. So during the Clinton administration in the 90s, it's called the Great Bond Massacre. Basically, anytime bond market investors, so people who hold US bonds, want to punish the president, they can, in essence, they can sell bonds and fuck up the yield rates. So when the US wants to borrow more money, it has to borrow at a higher interest rate. So imagine having like a higher mortgage rate, and they get to kind of set that. This is why I often say that the US president is a puppet, because when Clinton tried to do certain administrative policies, he was kind of fucked up by the bond vigilantes who kind of threatened to tank the whole economy. The Great Bond Massacre is interesting to read. I would encourage anyone to go read it. I'm going to read a quote from James Carville, who was Clinton's political advisor, and he's on, I think, on the news all the time still these days. I don't know why or how, but he said, "I used to think that if there was reincarnation, I wanted to come back as the president or the pope or as a 400 baseball hitter. But now I'd like to come back as the bond market. You can intimidate everybody." So these bond vigilantes, you can also see in the UK, more recently, Liz Truss, when she proposed her budget, they like flipped a shit, basically tried to tank the UK economy, and she was fired pretty quickly because they have a parliamentary system. She was out of the picture. In the US, we don't have a parliamentary system, but you can make life hell for the president. So the president has to come out and always trot this line that we believe in a strong US dollar. We believe in a strong US dollar. And like any deviation of that line by any Treasury Secretary, and the bond markets flip the fuck out. So even if you insinuate anything other than like, even if like your tone is fucked up, like they freak out. So you have to be so robotic and straight and just be like, we believe in a strong US dollar. Anything else, they fucking freak out. And then the president freaks out, the Treasury freaks out, and they always back down until Trump. Trump is the first one who just doesn't give a single fuck. The bond markets can get inverted, they can get crazy, they can get fucked, and he does not care. He doesn't care at all. It's kind of tremendous to observe that all these kind of systemic forces that kind of entrap and ensnare other presidents, he just doesn't give a fuck. He just barrels right through them. One of the, I think, critical things that Trump wants is a weakened US dollar. He's always on China's ass because China artificially depreciates the yen. Is it the yen, yuan? Their currency. I always mix it up with the Japanese one. The yuan. I don't know. Fuck it. They always are depreciating it. Yeah. Because when you have a lower currency, it's cheaper to buy your goods. So if China's goods are very cheap, we buy them, we have this trade deficit. Now, one of the principles of like, let's bring manufacturing back to the United States is like, let's essentially make US goods cheap on the international market. One way you do that is by depreciating the US dollar. If you combine that with the kind of tariffs, right, which is you increase the price of foreign goods and you decrease the price of US goods, you essentially flip-flop the trade deficit. So we should be sending our goods and services abroad, and we should be pulling in the world's money. Now, I don't know what the fuck we're going to do with the world's money. If someone can explain that one to me, I don't know. I mean, that's been a big issue in the United States. I guess the flip side of that is a lot of the money that goes abroad, you know, when we buy shit, They use it to buy real estate in the United States. So the Chinese, how do you think they own downtown Manhattan? How do you think they own half of all of our cities? It's like part of this whole gig, right? Which is we buy stuff, we give them dollars. They can't just sit on an endless pile of cash. So they take that cash and they buy stuff back in the United States because we accept US dollars. And we have very little restrictions or regulations on foreign parties, foreign agents buying shit in the US. So they come and they buy our country off of us, which is a problem. And I do think this is where it's like a broken clock is right twice a day. There are like a lot of severe issues that I think Republicans, the MAGA movement, have put their finger on. I think their solutions are fucking dumb and clumsy, and there's no fucking sophistication to them, and it's kind of a wrecking ball. But like some of the things they've pinpointed is like, yes, when foreign agents buy up the whole fucking country, it's bad for US, me and you, because if you want to buy in a fucking apartment or rent an apartment and there's less of a supply because half the apartments in Manhattan are sitting empty as investment vehicles for Chinese, that's not good for us. So there is, some things that, we really do need to look at. Or for instance, there is a lot of illegal dumping of cheap goods into the US market by China to purposely bankrupt certain industries. There's a crazy documentary about, I swear to God, it's about fucking garlic. The Chinese have just illegally dumped so much garlic into the US that they've essentially bankrupted all of our garlic farmers. So we now are kind of like need to rely on China for garlic. And maybe garlic isn't like the most, oh my God, like life-threatening national security good. But when you start seeing the same pattern across many goods and services, there's a problem there. And you can't bankrupt your whole country because someone else is illegally dumping. So some protectionism is probably needed with some sophistication and nuance. There's a lot of issues between the United States and China. They have absolutely like stolen every intellectual property we have, not just reverse engineer, but they've done, and the US has been culpable in so many stupid moves of selling and even just giving for free really important technologies that probably are for national security purposes really vital to China. So there's a lot of fucking issues that the Democrats, for whatever reason, ignore, don't make an issue out of, but are really harming everyday Americans, including people in cities, Democrats. This is a real issue. You can't just pretend like it's not. So, yeah, okay, China, that's their model, right? They depreciate their currency. They're doing all this kind of crazy shit. So I believe in Trump's head, he's like, well, why do we need a strong dollar? Fuck it, who cares? Let's depreciate the dollar. Let's reverse the flows of goods and services, reverse the trade deficit. And I have to assume at some point, the whole reserve currency thing, I don't know how you maintain that because, like I said, when you have a reserve currency, there will always be flows out of the country. So at some point, they're going to have to tear up the Bretton Woods Conference agreement. I don't see how else to achieve their policy aims of kind of isolating the United States. Of course, the shadow or beauty of it, I don't know, is that we won't be able to control the world economically. So the empire will have to come to an end on the economic side of things. On the defense side of things, we're already seeing that, right? With the essentially people threatening to tear up NATO, the whole Greenland thing, wishy-washy on Russia, Ukraine. So there's a lot of instances where they really don't want the US to be this empire. They want it to be a regional force, which is a video that merits its own kind of attention. So I don't see how Bretton Woods survives in the long run. I don't think they want the United States to be a reserve currency. I think the reserve currency has given a tremendous political influence, but also does come with economic difficulties. We are shouldering a lot of the world as United States, economically and defense-wise, double Ds once again. So in theory, maybe there is some merit to we take care of the inside of the house and stop carrying the load for essentially Europe and a lot of the rest of the world economically and in terms of weaponry. Trump wants to depreciate the dollar. He wants to print more dollars. I don't see how this doesn't lead to more rampant inflation and the devaluation of the dollar. So the dollar will become less and less and less powerful. What that means is you can buy less and less and less goods from abroad. Problem is we buy a lot of fucking goods from abroad, from the food that we eat to the goods we consume. So yeah, this kind of ripped the Band-Aid, and I do hope, I fucking pray for all our sakes that we do get our manufacturing up and running. Even though in my day job, I coach CEOs of also some pretty large fucking companies. I haven't heard a single one saying we're going to bring manufacturing back to the United States. They all laugh at that. And they're like, we're just going to diversify our supply chains and diversify and try and do tariff arbitrage, right? So basically try and find the lowest tariff rate countries to move manufacturing to, but no one's moving manufacturing back to the US. So there's going to be a really fucked up period potentially where our dollar can't buy shit. And we don't make enough shit in the country for our own self-sustainability. That's going to fucking suck. And so, yeah, maybe stocks will go up because they're going to juice the stocks. But the question is, anything you hold in US dollar is going to essentially become a lot less value. I'm trying not to be like so doomerism that's going to become worthless. But like, it might become worthless. I mean, if Europe, you piss off Europe, they can dump all of their US holdings back onto us and flood us. Right? All these people who own US dollars, US bonds, they can dump them and just absolutely fucking rock us. Again, this is a bit of the dance with the devil, is when you sell yourself to other people own you. And the more that we've gone down that path, the more they can flip the script and kind of fuck us back. So up until this point, we had influence and leverage over them. But if they sell everything in a coordinated way, then they have a lot of goddamn punishment towards us as Americans. So all of this to me is evidence that we're moving to a new economic order. The fundamentals of the economy are forever changed and will continue to forever change. And it's only a matter of time. This week, there was a criminal indictment. I think a criminal indictment of Jerome Powell, the Federal Reserve Chairman, because he's not doing what Trump wants. Even if nothing happens, in May, he has to retire. And so another Fed chairman is going to take over. And this threat is always on the table. You can be criminally prosecuted for not doing what the president wants, which we've just never seen, I don't think ever in U.S. history, this level of tinkering and meddling in the Federal Reserve by a U.S. president. So what happens when the fundamentals of the economy change? When the US dollar depreciates, when inflation goes fucking through the roof, when the economy stalls out, when you have this stagflation, when you might be breaking this whole thing of the reserve currency, and the more you fuck with your allies and other people who hold your currency in bonds, they might fucking dump it back on you. When you do all of this, the last place I want to put my money is in US dollar. That is the last motherfucking place I want to park my money. I have lost faith in the US dollar, and I have lost faith in the US economy as a result of losing faith in the US dollar. It's not that I've lost faith in the companies. I think the companies are doing pretty well, it seems, economically-ish, right? We're still, again, dealing with this stagnation in the labor market. But if the dollar gets so fucked up, if the bond markets get so fucked up, if the Fed gets so fucked up, if all of these levers of a system that's meant to keep a homeostasis, keep a balance, if you fuck them all up at the same time, like I was thinking last April when I made the decision to move to gold, I'm like, it's like you have a seesaw. Like usually you press on one side and then the seesaw can move. What happens when you press on both sides of the seesaw at once? Like you snap it in half. And I think that's what's happening. So last April on Liberation Day, I liberated myself of the US dollar and I moved all my money into gold. I sat there thinking, like, where the fuck is the safe place? Where's the safe place? Because it's not in the currency. It's not in the companies. It's not in the bonds. It's not in the real estate, probably. I don't know. That one's up for grabs. Like, I just kept going down the list and I was like, none of this adds up. The only place I can think of is moving it to euros, because Europe is very conservative and very stable, and Germany is going to fucking hold on to that shit with an iron fist. Euros are essentially still a proxy for the Deutschmark. They're not going to fucking let that move. You can bet your ass Germany will hold the euro strong. So I'm like, you can either move your fucking currency to euros. That's probably the safest place, I think, although Europe is kind of fucked long term, but I think their currency is strong. Or Or I was like, put it in the oldest fucking thing in the books, gold. Gold, because I think gold always has, for whatever fucking reason, this weird ass monkey humans, we see this shiny metal and we're always like, gold. I was like, gold's been around for I don't know how many thousands of years as a store of value, and I don't think it's going anywhere. So I personally chose to move everything to gold. This is not investment advice. I'll repeat it. This is a very, very risky and stupid move on some level to put all your assets into one fucking thing. So I really don't recommend this. Like, from the bottom of my heart, don't do this. Don't do what I did. On the flip side, I look at the fucking price of gold every few days and I'm like, damn, there's a lot of other people who have the same opinion as me, it seems, and are putting their money in gold, and the price of gold is fucking skyrocketing. I haven't sold the gold, so I can't say I made so much money, but my worth has gone up. If I sold it today, I will have made a shitload of money off of gold. But I haven't sold it. I still have the gold, so it's unrealized. So it's nothing. It means nothing. Nothing. And then if you sell it, then you're back to having US dollars, and that could fucking also mean nothing. So anyways, that's where I'm at. Is I would like to own gold and euros because that seems safe. And I think money loves safety. We're going through a big transformation, a big change. I don't think we have really grasped the level of the Trumpian project, but some of this is irreversible. And I think fucking with the Fed, depreciating the dollar, pissing off the Europeans and everyone else abroad, if they do try to dump everything back on us, if we fuck up our bond market, if we're in stagflation, if we stop being the reserve currency and rip up the Bretton Woods Conference agreement, bro, we're in for a load of pain. We're in for a shitload of pain, like a pain that we haven't seen since the Great Depression. I think it's going to get pretty fucking gnarly, personally. Weirdly, I'm happy about it. I don't know. I have a smile on my face. I'm ready. I'm ready to link arm in arm with you, fellow brethren, and walk to the tune of this crazy fucking song that we're all going to go through together. I think we're going to get fucked, but I'm going to go through it with a smile on my face. I'm going to enjoy the fucking, if that makes sense. That's my analysis. I'm just some random guy on the internet. My econ training is no better or worse than any other person who has a degree in economics. My time on Wall Street was thankfully short-lived, and I'm not some great trader. As I mentioned, I've chosen to put my money entirely in the S&P 500 up until Liberation Day last year. And it's the threats against Jerome Powell that have me spooked. The independence of the Fed has me spooked. And I'm going to keep holding on to gold because the ride is kind of just beginning. The ride is just beginning. Let's see what happens in May. Let's see who the new Fed chair is. Let's see if they're going to go along with Trump, or if he escalates his threats, or if they rip up Bretton Woods, or if we invade Greenland. I think all of these could potentially fuck with our money pretty bad. Interesting times. That's my analysis. A little bit of economics here. Probably got some shit wrong. Let me know if I did. And for those who are in the great gold rush with me, let's fucking go. Let's fucking go.